In this chapter, we're going to focus on working with files and directories in PHP. I want you to set everything we've been doing with object-oriented programming aside. We're going to be focusing on the file system for now, and we're going to be coming back to the object-oriented later when we talk about uploading files to the file system. But first, we have some basics that we need to take care of. Now, because we're going to be setting all of that object-oriented programming aside, let's close up our photo gallery and let's go back to the B2B sandbox where we were working earlier. And let's create ourselves a new file in there. Let's call it filebasics.php. Make sure you put it in your B2B sandbox. And this will be the file where we can take a look at some of the basics of working with files. Now, the most important thing of working with files and the file system in PHP is the magic constant file, underscore, and then all capitals, file, underscore. I'll go ahead and put a BR tag at the end of this. Let's go ahead and save this file, and let's open up a new browser window. We're going to want to make sure that we go back to our sandbox and load up filebasics.php. And look what it gave me when it echoed back the value of that magic constant file. It gave me the full path to get to that file. So it illustrates that it knows exactly where that file is located, the file that we're loading up. So underscore file is this file that's being loaded. Now, there's another magic constant that goes along with it, which is line. And let's load that up, and you'll see that it comes back and it says 4. Now that it becomes obvious then that line tells you what line we're looking at. We can see here it's numbered 4. One caveat with this is be careful once you include files, because then the line number may not be what you expect if we have other files that have been included, if we're calling functions inside of functions. So just be careful about that with line number and be aware that it may not be quite what you expect. Now, if we want to get the directory information about the file that we're working in, we can do that by calling a function on it. dir name underscore file. We'll pass that in, and it will be able to simply parse out the directory name from the file name. I want to also at the same time show you that there's another version of this, which is only in PHP 5.3, and that's simply to say dir, and that's the same thing as a magic constant that will return the directory name. Now you'll see mine's a different color because I'm not running 5.3 yet. It hasn't been released at the time that I'm recording it. This does the exact same thing. They're equivalent. So for now you can use this, in the future you can use this, but you also can take advantage of this once you're using 5.3. So let's just bring those up and try them. You'll see it didn't work for me. If you are running on 5.3, you probably will see the same information there a second time. So now that we understand how to reference the file that we're in and the directory in, we're ready to start taking a look at a few functions. The first of these is simply file exists. Does the file exist? And if it does, return yes or no. I'm just using a simple ternary operator here to return yes or no. Of course, the file that we're in does exist. That's not very interesting, but we could also say something more interesting like the directory name of this file when added to /basic.html. Does that exist? Now notice we're building up a path here. We found the directory name, and then from there, we added basic.html. So here's the directory name, B2B sandbox. It's just a string, and to that, we'll put /basic.html. Does that exist? Yes, both of them exist, the file that we're in and basic.html. Now, the quirky thing about file exists is that it also works on just directories. Does the directory exist is the same thing as file exists. So don't be confused because it says file. What it really means is this part of the file system. Does it exist? So if we try that on the directory name, it also returns true. It does exist. Instead, if we want to find out if something actually is a file or not, we need to call a different method, which is file. So we can call that both on the basic.html page and on the directory, and we'll see what we get back. Yes and no. And of course, the corollary to that is being able to ask not just is it a file, but is it a directory? Is dir. So is this a directory? Well, no, it's not. But this should be a directory. So we'll just do both of those and check. Sure enough, no and yes are the answers that come back. And just for the sake of completeness, I want to show you that you also can simply reference the directory that this file is in by calling ... Remember how to use ... when we were navigating the file system from the command line? It works here as well. So is ... a directory? And it figures out, yes, that's what we're talking about. It is the directory that this file is in. So that also works as well. Now, these are going to make up the fundamental building blocks for working with the file system, because before we write a file, for example, we'll want to check and make sure that the file doesn't already exist. Or after we've written a file, we'll want to make sure that it does exist. We might want to check that a file exists before we try and read it, or make sure that it is a file and not a directory before we try and read it. So these are going to be the toolbox that we're going to be using going forward. So get used to them, experiment with them a little bit, and when you're ready, move on to the next movie where we'll take a look at file permissions.